everybody, I'm Jason Martin, and welcome to the Champion Faction, where I share my love for Stonemaier Games. Today, I'm taking a look at Pendulum, which is a 1 to 5 player game released at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in the summer of 2020. Pendulum is a very unusual game in that it uses time as a game mechanism. There are no player turns in the game. Instead, the game is divided into 4 real-time rounds when all players will be placing their workers, gaining resources, and building their engine to more efficiently move along the 4 tracks that are required to win the game. In between each round is a council phase when various elements are reset, and it kind of gives the players a bit of a break. Before I tell you what I think about it, I want you to know that I've recorded a playthrough of the solo version of the game. And if you want to watch that before checking out my review, please feel free to click the I in the corner of the screen or in the show notes. So now let's take a look at how the game works. Welcome to the world of Dunya. There's a surprisingly elaborate backstory to the theme of the game, which I won't go into. The main point is that players are various nobles vying to become the true ruler of Dunya. To do so, player must advance on these 4 tracks: popularity, prestige, power, and this little one, legendary achievement. That happens primarily through the action of the 4 real-time rounds. At the beginning of each round, all 3 of these timers here are flipped and immediately begin running. There are 2 types of workers: these little regular workers and grande workers. Players start the game with 1 of each. But they may acquire up to 2 more workers throughout the game, and they may upgrade one of their regular workers to have 2 grande workers. But they can never have more than 4 workers total. Players can place workers in these gold frames of rows that do not have timers, but they are not allowed to take that action until the timer is flipped onto their row. When that timer is flipped, workers are then moved into the bottom section, paying the costs such as any gold in the purple and green spaces or military tokens in the 1 black action space, and they also get these benefits down at the bottom. Then the workers must stay in that space until the timer runs out. Grande workers, the larger ones, can be placed on any space without a timer there, regardless of what other workers may be there. Regular workers can only be placed in any black space without a timer, but if placed in any green space, there cannot be any other workers there, so these regular workers can be blocked. The various benefits of the spaces are gaining resources, which are these military or red tokens, the prestige or culture, which is the blue, and gold, which are these yellow tokens. Players may also get votes as benefits, which are used in the council phase between the timed rounds. And I'll explain that in a minute. The benefits may also allow the players to spend military, which are these red tokens, to gain province cards. Province cards, when acquired, are slid underneath different areas of the player map that make these banner actions more powerful. The red, yellow, and blue icons that are on the board here allow players to move along those tracks on their player boards. And different colored banners with the question marks, such as here, 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 and here, allow players to activate those banners on their player boards, including any province tokens that they may add to their banners. Now, this is all going on in real time for all players. Again, there are no turns in this game. So as you're placing your workers, taking your action, gaining the benefits, the other players are doing so at the exact same time. In this 3-player game, that would be fairly chaotic, perhaps. In addition to placing workers, players also have a hand of stratagem cards that provide various benefits, such as gaining some resources for free, converting some resources to gain additional workers, and other benefits. You can play as many of these cards as you want, but you can't pick them up to play again without paying some amount of resources to do so. All the while, players are monitoring this achievement card for that round, which changes every round. If at any point a player has met all the criteria of the card, they can immediately claim either the legendary achievement, which allows them to move their gray token over, or they can claim the benefit at the bottom. They can only claim the legendary achievement if it's still there, so only one can claim it per round, and if they hadn't claimed it in a previous round. As I said, players can't remove their workers from the rows with timers until the timer has ended and a player flips it to the other row. So now these workers could be able to move. Now, no one's required to flip it. It can sit there empty as long as no player flips it, but the workers are stuck there until you do. The black timer is the shortest in the game at 45 seconds, and during the game, that goes by surprisingly quickly. The green timer is 2 minutes, and the purple timer is 3 minutes. The purple timer also serves as a timer for the round. The timer can be flipped up to 3 times, which are indicated by these purple tokens. After it's been flipped 3 times, the end of the round is triggered. Players may continue to play their cards and take their actions as they're able, but no more timers may be flipped. When all the players have taken all the actions they're able to, the council phase begins. The council phase takes place in between each round, and that's when votes are counted and player privilege is ranked right here based on votes. Privilege is used to break ties during the timed round if there's a disagreement about who placed a worker in a limited space first. But more importantly, it sets the order for choosing reward cards, which can be immediate benefits or additional stratagem cards to add to your hand for real-time rounds. After the 4th timed round, there's one final council phase where players gain council rewards. And then the player who has moved all of their tokens, including the one for the legendary achievement, into this parchment area is the winner. If more than one player has done so, whoever has moved the tokens the most spaces into the parchment is the winner. If more than one player is tied in that, however, the player that's ranked higher and privileged is the winner. If no one has been able to move their legendary token into the parchment, then no one wins. Only players who have moved their legendary token into the parchment are eligible to be winner. So that's Pendulum. Now let's talk about what I think about this game. Overall, Pendulum does a lot of really interesting things, and I like the way that it uses time and the way that it forces you to wait until you act rather than forcing you to act. When this game first came out, a lot of people were concerned about the real-time game requiring somewhat frantic play. While this game could possibly bring that, it doesn't necessarily do so. The fact is that the timers don't force action, rather it prevents action until the timers runs out, and that's a major point. Also, the engine building aspect using the province cards is really cool and fun. It makes taking those banner actions feel so much more powerful. I also really like the artwork where it exists, which is mostly on the player mats. The characters are vibrant and interesting and unique on both sides of the player mat, and I really would like to learn more about them and the story behind it. Stonemaier Games have never printed 2 games that take place in the same universe, but this is definitely one that I would like to see more from. I really appreciate the asymmetry that exists among the characters in the game. The basic version of the characters are only marginally asymmetric, varying somewhat in starting resources and minor differences in stratagem cards and the specific links of the three of the tracks on the player boards. But the advanced versions of the characters create a lot more asymmetry, opening up very different strategies for the different players. Now, I haven't played those advanced characters nearly often enough to determine if I have a favorite or which ones feel more powerful than others, but I'm eager to explore those versions of the characters more in the future. Also, I really like the solo game. I didn't really describe the solo game in this overview, but as I mentioned, you can watch a playthrough of the solo game on my channel. The solo game is somewhat played like a 3-player game, where the player plays as normal, but there are 2 Automabots that block spaces in the purple and green areas of the board. They're controlled by a single deck of cards that are triggered based on a couple of the actions that the players will take. So whenever the player flips certain timers or removes workers from the bottom area of the board, it'll trigger the Automa cards. At the end of each round, each Automabot acquires points and votes for privilege. Because there are no player turns, the player has to get used to recognizing those triggers for the Automa cards. But once that becomes second nature, which I found to be the case probably after 2 or 3 games, the solo game plays very smoothly. It's mostly the player going about their strategy, only briefly adjusting the Automa as the cards are triggered. So overall, I really like the solo game, probably more than the multiplayer game. And that brings me to what I really don't like about Pendulum. First, this game makes it almost impossible to watch the game to make sure that it's being played correctly and that resources and points are being spent and acquired accurately. That's not to say that I'm worried about people cheating, but as with any game, it's easy to make mistakes. You take an action that has a cost, and it's easy to simply forget to pay that cost. Or you miscount the resources spent, or you move your markers up the tracks too much, or move the wrong marker. Mistakes happen in games all the time, innocently and easily. There are a lot of ways that almost any game can go wrong, but most games allow everyone at the table an overview to make sure that everything is done correctly. However, Pendulum makes that in-game auditing process virtually impossible. Consequently, you just kind of have to trust that at the end of the game, the result is accurate. Maybe it is, or maybe whatever inaccuracies made ultimately didn't really matter. The problem is there's no real way to know or even have an educated guess. My next concern might be the biggest problem I have with the game, and that is the theme, which I really like and could potentially be really engrossing, but the problem is it's totally lost. In this game, supposedly, I'm a noble vying for control of the kingdom. At no point does this game feel like that. I'm moving cubes onto my player mat and then taking them off again and moving a set of little markers along a track. The story in the rulebook talks about time and a clock and some other things like that, but the primary mechanism of placing workers in spaces without timers and then taking the action when these timers flip, I don't see how that's connected to the theme at all. It's all incredibly abstracted in a way that's frankly a turnoff. Even the graphic designs and components kind of add to this disconnection. Now, I absolutely love the artwork. Like I said, it's really vibrant, it's really interesting, and it really hints at a very deep and thematic world that I want to learn more about. But in the midst of the game, when you're actually playing, you don't see any of that. The board is very busy, and the art on the province cards is really easy to miss, especially when they slip under the player mats. The color cubes have no thematic meaning or connection at all. These cubes could have been anything. Supposedly, they represent power, culture, and gold, but honestly, I doubt anybody will care or remember that when they're playing the game. They're just simply red, blue, and yellow cubes. Now, I really love it when games marry a deep Euro-style game mechanisms with strong theme and story. And most Stonemaier games do that very well. That's frankly what I love about their games. This one, however, doesn't. So overall, this isn't a bad game. I've had fun every time I've played this, but it's definitely not for everyone. Despite the unique way that it uses the real-time aspects, if you don't like real-time games, I don't think this will change your mind, nor will it necessarily be an exception. During the real-time rounds, you're still having to think fast before the timer runs out or before someone else flips a timer. But if you do enjoy real-time games, this could be a real win for you because it does a lot of things that I haven't really seen before in games, or at least not in this way and not in this combination. And the engine building, the worker placement, a lot of the other mechanisms work really well within the game. But the negatives can't be denied. There's no way to audit the game as it's being played, and there might as well be no theme at all. It feels and plays very much like a straight-up abstract game. While I love the artwork and the world that the game suggests, all of that is completely lost when playing. I'm simply moving cubes, advancing on meaningless tracks, and flipping timers. And that's ultimately why this game fails for me. Now, I'm not getting rid of it anytime soon. I'm going to keep this in my collection, because I do enjoy it. And as a Stonemaier fan, I want to have a copy of each of their games. But the problems will be there every time I play. So those are my thoughts about Pendulum by Stonemaier Games. Again, if you're interested in seeing a solo playthrough of the game, you can click the I in the top right corner, or you can click the link in the show notes. And if you enjoy these videos, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe, like this video, make a comment, share with me what you think about Pendulum. Have you played it? Do you share some of my concerns, or maybe have you found a way to overcome those and enjoy the game even more? And so until next time, I'll be making my way to the factory as the champion faction. Bye.